Okay, so today we'll be doing a NAT 105 first module that is about the lower limb. Okay. Okay, Bennett.
Yes, ma'am.
So, is my PPT visible to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, as we have discussed in the upper limb, that the appendicular skeleton consists of upper limb and the lower limb. Okay. So, upper limb we have already done in an at 102. So, now we will be dealing with the lower limb. So, what is the difference between upper limb and lower limb? The difference is there in the function, but they have the same structural plan. Okay. Now, why there is a difference? Because the bones of the lower limb have to support the weight of the entire body. Okay, therefore these bones of the lower limb, they are the largest and the heaviest bones, and the lower limb consists of pelvic girdle, thigh, leg and foot, and all each lower limb is formed by 31 bones. Okay, then it carries the entire weight of the erect body, and the bones of the lower limb are thicker and stronger than those of the upper limb. They divided into three segments, that is thigh, leg and foot. So here, as you can see, this is the hip bone, which is made up of two pelvic bones, right? This is the femur bone, that is the long bone, and then there is tibia and fibula, they are also the long bone. Then we have short bones, tarsals, and then we have miniature long bones by the name of metatarsal and the phalanges. So this is the anterior view of lower limb, this is the lateral view of lower limb, and this is the posterior view of lower limb. Okay. Then, what is the significance of pelvic girdle? See, the pelvic girdle, it is attaching to the lower limb to the axial skeleton. So, the attachment of the pelvis to the sacrum is very stable with the help of strong attachment, not like the pectoral girdle, because the lower limb has to take the weight of the limbs, right, and of the body. So the socket for the femur, that is the acetabulum, is deep and holds the femur extremely well, right? So it is less mobile than the ball and socket joint of the upper limb, that is of the shoulder joint. Then if we go ahead and look at the each wing of the pelvic girdle, it is formed from a bone called the coxal bone. Now when we see the view of the pelvic girdle, can you see that the pelvis, yes, it is made up of three bones. It is ilium, ischium and the pubis, right, which is connected posteriorly with the sacrum to form the sacroiliac joint. Whereas anteriorly, both of the pelvic bones, they come and join and form the pubic symphysis. Right? Now, if we go ahead, it is attaching to the lower limb, to the trunk and the spine. And it is supporting the visceral organs. And it is also attaching to the axial skeleton by strong ligaments like the sacroiliac ligaments, which are connected between the sacrum and the ilium. Now there is a acetabulum, which is a deep cut that is holding the head of the femur. So the lower limb have less freedom of movement as compared to the upper limb, but they are more stable than the upper limb. Now it consists of paired hip bones, that is the coxal bones, and they unite anteriorly with each other by the pubic symphysis and posteriorly with the sacrum, forming the sacroiliac joint. Now there is a deep basin-like structure that is formed by coxal bone, sacrum and coccyx. Now if you see the base of bony pelvis, this is how the bony pelvis looks like with some certain features on the bone that consist of iliac fossa, iliac crest, anterior superior iliac spine, sacral promontory, anterior inferior iliac spine, pelvic brim, acetabulum. Then in the pubic, it's pubic tubercle, pubic crest and pubic symphysis. In the ischium, that is posterior inferiorly, there is ischial tuberosity, right, and the ischius ramus. Now the coxal bones, they consist of three separate bones in childhood, that is ilium, ischium and pubis. So when the bone they fuse retains separate names to region of the coxal bones. So there is an acetabulum. Now what is the significance of this acetabulum? It is a deep hemispherical socket on lateral pelvic surface. And how do you define the ilium bone, which is the superior most bone of the pelvis? That it is large flaring bone which forms the superior region of the coxal bone, and it is a site of attachment for many muscles. So the articulation with the sacrum is forming the sacroiliac joint. Then when you talk about ischium, it is formed by posterior inferior region of the coxal bones, and anteriorly it is joining the pubis to form the pubic symphysis. And anteriorly ischium is joining the pubis, so that the pubis can give attachment with the contralateral hip bone in a joint which is known as secondary cartilaginous joint, which is pubic symphysis. Then in the ischium, we have the ischial tuberosity. That is the strongest part of the hip bone, because from the ischial tuberosity, we have hamstring group of muscles. Now what are the name of these muscles? Biceps femoris, semimembranosus and semitendinosus. Okay. Now if we talk about pubis bone, what are the bony landmarks and how do you define it? It forms the anterior region of the coxal bones. It lies horizontally in anatomical position, and it forms the pubic symphysis. That is when the two pubic bones are joined by the fibrocartilage at the midline. Now this is the lateral and medial view of the hip bone, which is giving the surface landmarks of ilium, ischium and the pubis. What is true and false pelvis? See, the bony pelvis is divided into two regions. One is the false or the greater pelvis. That is only bounded by the alae of the iliac bone or by the boundaries of the iliac bone. The second is the true or the lesser pelvis, which is inferior to the pelvic brim. That is forming a bowl containing the pelvic organ. Now, why there is a difference? Because you and me will think that it is bony pelvis, so it will consist of all the pelvic organs. No. The false pelvis that is onto the upper edge, which is formed by the ilium, does not contain any pelvic organ. This is only the true or the lesser pelvis, which is having accommodability and accountability of pelvic organs. So what are these pelvic organs? Pelvic organs are those organs which are helping in bowel and bladder functioning. So this is the false pelvis. This is the true pelvis. Okay. Then there's pelvic structures in childbearing. So the major difference between the male and the female pelvis is that the female pelvis is adapted for childbearing. Why? Because this pelvis is lighter, because this has to connect with the birth canal, wider and shallower than in males, and it is providing more room for the true pelvis. Now this is the difference between the female and male pelvis. There's some characteristics which are defining them. For example, the female pelvis, it is tilted forward, whereas the male is tilted less far forward. The bone thickness is less in male and more in male, less in female and more in male. The acetabula is smaller in female and larger in male. The pubic arch. Can you see this pubic arch? This is more rounded and broader in the female pelvis, whereas it is more acute in the male pelvis, which makes an angle of 50 to 60 degree. Other than that, there is pelvic inlet and pelvic outlet. In females, the pelvic inlet is wider, oval from side to side, whereas in males, it is narrow and basically heart-shaped. Pelvic outlet in female is wider and the ischial tuberosities are shorter, everted, and they are apart as compared to the male. And then the sacrum is wider in females, shorter, and the sacral curvature is marked. Whereas in male, the sacrum is narrow, longer, sacral promontory more ventral. Coccyx is more movable and straighter in female, whereas it is less movable and curves ventrally in male. The greater sciatic notch is wide and shallow in female, whereas it is narrow and deep in male. Now, when we talk about the thigh, the region of the lower limb that is between the hip and the knee is known as the thigh. So, anatomically, when we see the thigh, it consists of one long bone which is known as the femur. That is the single bone of the thigh. Now, when we talk about femur, as we all know that it is the longest and strongest bone of the body. It is ball-shaped head which is articulating with the acetabulum. Since ball-shaped head is articulating with the acetabulum to form the hip joint. Then patella. If you want to define patella, it is a triangular sesamoid bone which is embedded in the tendon that secures the quadriceps muscle. It protects the knee anteriorly and it improves the leverage of the thigh muscles across the knee because the quadriceps group of muscle are inserting on the patella. Leg. Now what is leg? Leg refers to the region of the lower limb which is between the knee and the ankle and it is composed of tibia and the fibula. Tibia is more massive medial bone of the leg and it receives weight of the body from the femur. Whereas when we talk about fibula, it is a stick-like bone which is the lateral bone of the leg. So tibia and fibula, they are connected to each other through the interosseous membrane. The tibia is articulating with femur to form the knee joint. The tibia is articulating with talus at the inferior to form the ankle joint. And fibula does not contribute in the formation of knee joint. Yes, but fibula stabilizes the ankle joint. Now bones of the leg, tibia and the fibula, they form two joints. Proximally it is proximal tibiofibular joint and distally it is distal tibiofibular joint. Now why do we say that the fibula, though it is not considered a bone to be involved in the formation of knee joint, but still it is stabilizing the ankle joint because it is giving an extension by the name of lateral malleolus. Okay. Now the structure of the tibia and the fibula, this is the anterior view, this is the posterior view, where we have the lateral condyle, medial condyle, head, fibula, interosseous membrane, anterior border, lateral malleolus, medial malleolus. Now foot. Foot is composed of tarsus, metatarsus and the phalanges. So the important function is to support the body weight. It acts as a lever to propel body forward while walking. And the segmentation, of the foot, having so many joints formed by the tarsals, metatarsals and interphalangeals, it makes the foot more pliable and adapted to uneven ground surfaces. Now when we talk about tarsals or tarsus, it makes up the posterior half of the foot. It contains 7 bones that are known as tarsals. So the body weight is primarily borne by the talus and the calcaneus. When you talk about metatarsus or metatarsals, It consists of 5 small long bones which are called the metatarsal, which is numbered 1 to 5, beginning with the hallux or beginning with the great toe. The first metatarsal is supporting the body weight. That is, the metatarsal which is attached to the great toe is supporting the body weight. Now, when we talk about the phalanges of the toes, there are 14 phalanges of the toes. They are smaller and less nimble than those of the fingers. Structure and similar are similar to the phalanges of the finger, except for the great toe. Each toe has 3 phalanges, that is proximal, middle and distal. The same thing was used to happen in the upper limb. Bones of the foot, this is how they look like. So these are the 7 tarsals: calcaneal, talus, navicular, cuboid, lateral cuneiform, intermediate cuneiform, and the medial cuneiform. Then we have metatarsals starting from 1 to 5. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, and this is 5. Then we have phalanges. Here in great toe, we have only 2 phalanges, proximal and distal. Other than that, in all the 3 toes, we have 3 phalanges, that is distal, middle, and proximal. This is the medial view of the tarsals, metatarsals, and a sustaneculum talli, which is on the calcaneus. This is a very important landmark. Then in the lateral view, we have calcaneus, cuboid, talus, facet for lateral malleolus, intermediate cuneiform, and lateral cuneiform. Then, very important part comes as the arches of the foot. Now, foot has 3 important arches, that is medial and lateral longitudinal arch, as well as the transverse arch. Now, why do we need arches? We need arches because we have to walk in uneven ground surfaces. So the arches are maintained and they bear the weight easily also. So the arches are there maintained by interlocking shapes of the tarsals, ligaments, and tendons. So this is the medial longitudinal arch, this is the lateral longitudinal arch, this is the medial longitudinal arch, this is the lateral longitudinal arch, and this is the transverse arch. Now we will talk about the muscles of the lower limb. Okay, because these are very important muscles. Screen is visible to you. So the muscles of the gluteal region includes gluteus maximus, gluteus maximus, gluteus medius, gluteus minimus, piriformis, obturator internus, obturator externus, superior gemini, inferior gemini, and quadratus femoris. So here this is the gluteus maximus, which is coming from the gluteal surface of the ilium, that is the posterior surface of the ilium, and it is attaching onto the gluteal tuberosity. Whereas the gluteus minimus, it is also coming from the gluteal surface of the ilium, but it is attaching to the greater trochanter. Then we have great gluteus medius, that is coming from the gluteal surface of the ilium and attaching to the greater trochanter of the femur. Then we have piriformis, that is attaching to the greater trochanter of the femur. Then we have obturator internus and externus. Both of them are coming from the pubis and attaching onto the GT. Then we have gemelli, they are also attaching to the GT. And the quadratus femoris, that is attaching onto the quadrate tubercle. So these are the muscles of the gluteal region. Then we have muscles of the thigh. So in the muscles, when we say, we divide it into anterior compartment or front of the thigh, posterior compartment, back of the thigh, middle compartment or the adductor. So in the front of the thigh, we have sartorius, tensor fascia lata, quadriceps femoris. So in quadriceps femoris, we have 4 muscles by the name of rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis and vastus intermedius. Then we have iliacus, which is more laterally onto the thigh, and psoas major, which is medially. But both of them, iliopsoas, they help in hip flexion. Then the muscles in the medial compartment, we have gracialis, pectineus, adductor brevis, longus and magnus. And in the posterior thigh, we have semitendinosus, semimembranosus and biceps femoris. So this is how the orientation of muscles in front of the thigh is all about. Now we come to the adductor group, which consists of adductor brevis, longus, magnus and gracialis. Hamstring, they originate from the ischial tuberosity, and mainly they are 2 joint muscles. They are crossing the hip joint also and knee joint also. Muscles of the leg is divided into 3 compartments, that is anterior compartment, lateral compartment and posterior compartment. So in the interior compartment, we have tibialis anterior, extensor halsus longus, extensor digitorum longus, extensor digitorum brevis and peroneus tertius. Whereas in lateral compartment, we have peroneus longus and peroneus brevis. Okay. Then we come to the back of the leg or the posterior compartment of the leg. We have gastrocnemius, soleus, plantaris, popliteus, flexor halsus longus, flexor digitorum longus and tibialis posterior. Okay. Then the muscles of the foot. This is something very confusing, that there is extrinsic group of muscle and there is intrinsic group of muscle. So the extrinsic group of muscle, it is arising from the anterior, posterior and lateral compartment of the leg. So what are their action? Their action is eversion, inversion, plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. Whereas the intrinsic group of muscle, they are located within the foot. So they are responsible for fine motor actions of the foot movement of individual digits. So they are divided into muscles of dorsum of the foot and sole of the foot. Now if we see the dorsal aspect of the muscles of the foot, we have extensor digitorum brevis and extensor halsus brevis. And in the plantar aspect, we have 10 intrinsic muscles that are located in the sole of the foot. Now, what is the significance of these 10 intrinsic muscles? They act collectively to stabilize the arches of the foot and individually to control movement of the digits. So the muscles of the plantar aspects are in 4 layers, that is superficial to deep. So this is the layer 1, which has abductor hallucis, abductor digiti minimi and flexor digitorum brevis. Okay. So we have 3 muscles in the first layer of plantar muscles, and the plantar aponeurosis has been cut to reveal the underlying flexor digitorum. Then the layer 2, we have lumbricals, quadratus plantae and tendon of flexor digitorum longus. Then this is how the second layer of the plantar muscles look like. Then in the third layer, we have adductor hallucis, that is the transverse head, flexor halsus brevis, adductor hallucis oblique head and flexor digiti minimi brevis. This is how it looks like. Then in the fourth layer of the plantar muscles, that we have dorsal interossei and the plantar interossei. Okay. Now the plantar interossei is unipinnate and the dorsal interossei is bipinnate. Because the dorsal interossei has to do abduction, dab, whereas the plantar interossei, it has to do adduction. Therefore, they are unipinnate. Then we come to the femoral triangle. So the femoral triangle, it is a triangular fascia which is a superior anterior third of the thigh, which is bounded by 2 muscles and 1 ligament. The ligament is superiorly, which is inguinal ligament. Medially we have adductor longus and laterally we have the sartorius. And the apex of the triangle is made by the lateral, by meeting of lateral and medial borders, and floor from lateral to medial by iliopsoas. And the roof is made by the skin, superficial fascia, fascia lata and cribri from fascia. So this is how a femoral triangle looks like. Okay, here it is the lateral border through the sartorius. This is the apex which is made by joining the lateral border and the medial border. And this is the base which is formed by the inguinal ligament. Then we have the roof which is formed by the fascia lata and cribriform fascia. And then we have the floor which is formed by iliacus muscle and psoas tendon. So the contents of the femoral triangle is femoral sheath and its content, femoral nerve and its branches, femoral artery and its branches, and femoral vein and its tributaries. So these are the contents of the femoral triangle. So if you go from medially to laterally, you will see a terminal part of great saphenous vein. Then we have deep inguinal lymph nodes. Then we have femoral vein. Just parallel to femoral vein, we have femoral artery. And then parallel to femoral artery, we have femoral nerve. So if you go medially to laterally, in the femoral triangle, if you go medially to laterally in the femoral triangle, it is van. First, it is the femoral vein, then the femoral artery, and then the femoral nerve. Okay. And after femoral nerve, you will also see a lateral cutaneous nerve of thigh. Other than that, you will also see saphenous nerve and the lateral circumflex femoral artery, which is a branch of femoral artery. Then this is how it looks like when you go from superficial to deep. Skin, superficial fascia, fascia lata, cribriform fascia, femoral sheath, lymph node, then femoral artery, femoral vein, femoral artery, and femoral nerve. Now, what is a femoral sheath? Femoral sheath is a funnel-shaped facial sheath which is enclosing the upper 3-4 cm of femoral vessels. So it is divided into two compartments. That is, medial compartment is the femoral canal, and the lateral compartment from medial to lateral is femoral vein, artery, and genitofemoral nerve. So the femoral artery and vein, they are enclosed in the femoral sheath. This femoral sheath is an extension of transversalis fascia. So this is how the components of the femoral sheath looks like from lateral to medial. Laterally, we have femoral branch of genitofemoral nerve, femoral artery, then lateral septum. Intermediately, we have femoral vein, medial septum, and then medially we have lymph node of Cloquet. Then the femoral canal. Then we have the adductor canal, which is a narrow vesical tunnel in the thigh, which is running from the apex of the femoral triangle to the adductor hiatus, which is located deep to medial third of the sartorius. Okay, so it is like first there is the femoral triangle, then the adductor canal, then the adductor hiatus, and then the popliteal fossa. So when we talk about the adductor canal boundaries and contents, we have the anterior lateral wall, which is formed by the vastus medialis, the posterior wall, which is formed by the adductor longus, above and below it, it is the adductor magnus, and medially it is formed by a strong fibrous membrane that is stretching across the anterior lateral and posterior borders. Okay, so these are the contents of the adductor canal, that is the femoral artery, femoral vein, saphenous vein, and nerve to vastus medialis. Now, what is the clinical significance of adductor canal? The femoral artery is exposed and ligated in the adductor canal during aneurysm of the popliteal artery. Okay, so when this happened, this artery at this side is healthy and it did not got torn. But it may occur if the artery is tied in the popliteal fossa, which is immediately above the popliteal aneurysm. Now we talk about the popliteal fossa. A space is a lozenge shaped space back of the knee. It contains popliteal vessels, tibia, tibial and the common peroneal nerves, termination of the false fibrous nerves, lower part of the posterior femoral cutaneous nerve, obturator nerve, and lymph gland. So this is how it looks like. The border of the popliteal fossa, it is formed by upper, medial, and lateral. So medially we have semimembranosus and semitendinosus, and laterally we have biceps femoris. And medially, lower medial, we have gastrocnemius ka medial head, and laterally we have plantaris and gastrocnemius, and the floor is made up of the popliteus capsule and the femur, whereas the roof of the popliteal fossa is made up of the short saphenous and communicating vein, lateral sural cutaneous nerve, sural communicating nerve, and the end of posterior femoral cutaneous nerve, as well as the fascia lata.